In January 2012, Tesco announced that it planned to drop carbon footprinting from its product labels. This was huge. To date, Tesco had been the largest adopter and main proponent of carbon labeling on the product shelves. Walmart had tried something or had initiated or said they wanted to do something similar and never quite got their arms around it. Tesco, though, had done several thousand of their products, and in January of 2012, when they announced that they were no longer going to do that, the big question that sort of reverberated around the community was, what does this mean for life cycle assessment? What does this mean for the attempts to put carbon footprinting of products into the retail space? And there's a couple of things that I'd like to share from my perspective as a sustainability consultant. And the first one is, I don't think life cycle assessment is going away. If anything, I think that the LCA train is still chugging along. I think that more and more we will look to companies not just to tell us about their organizational carbon footprint and their impacts at a corporate level, but I think increasingly we will be asking them to tell us about product specific impacts. And the best way to do that is still through a life cycle assessment. The second thing is I think it was a huge wake-up call for the LCA community, pushing very complicated, very expensive, very time-consuming, full-on life cycle assessments. These LCAs cost $100,000 and up, often took, a year or more to complete, often required the expertise of specific life cycle assessment experts, and all for what? For 2 or 3 years down the line to be able to get an environmental product declaration or an EPD or some sort of label that would go on your product. I think the reality is that labels on products are probably not going to pick up steam, at least in the near future, the next 5 years. I'm not telling clients that they need to worry about it. But there are other reasons to do life cycle assessment. And why do I think, on the one hand, the life cycle train is still chugging along, but that maybe the expensive full-on ones aren't really gaining steam as we thought that they might? Well, one is that the reality is that most companies, for their life cycle assessment needs, can use what we call a scoping LCA methodology. This sort of takes a bit of a quick and dirty model. It's typically using secondary data from a data set that's already been collected rather than primary data. So, for example, you don't need to go back and track down what coal mine your energy is coming from, but you can instead go to a data set and say, what is the average impact of a pound of coal or a megawatt of electricity based in my grid hooked up to my local electricity system. So I think there's other ones, options there that make a lot of sense. The scoping LCAs, which are a bit of a higher level, do not allow you to do a label or an environmental product declaration, but do give you all of the other benefits of life cycle assessment, which is where I think the real value is for companies. It's identifying where the hot spots of opportunity are. It is where there is excessive impact. It also allows you to model or run scenarios for new product development. So if we use this product versus that product, what will the relative impact be? I think there are a lot of really interesting software options available that mean with a little bit of education, anyone in your organization could be running this modeling, which I think is a huge step forward, even though I may be talking myself out of a job. I don't think that you should need to hire a life cycle assessment expert to do that scoping level LCA. I think there's definitely times when it is helpful to have someone on your team with that deep experience that you can call on for those more complicated questions. But I think a lot of these softwares, and one I'll just mention specifically is Sustainable Minds. So sustainableminds.com, we actually have a partnership with them. We love their software, very easy to use, very intuitive, lots of really good education and research and frequently asked questions on their website. For most companies starting out with LCAs, that's the type of level that you want to start. And what we've heard from other experts is that the margin of error you would get by doing a full-on, very expensive, very complicated life cycle assessment typically is about the same as the margin of error you do with a scoping LCA using the data from a data set. So you do sort of have to ask the question, do we really need that full-on, very expensive, very complicated one when we can use the scoping LCA? So the only reason, in my opinion, you would want to do that is if you really were going for some sort of carbon label. So what does Tesco's decision mean? Well, I think it informs where we're going with the life cycle assessment. I think more and more we'll be looking at sort of those quick and dirty, those scoping LCAs, which give us a hint but don't necessarily take a full year to run. Hopefully that will help us pick up speed. More companies can tackle it. It will be less expensive, and the more we know, the better we're able to plan for more sustainable products down the road.